Ta-da! We're here. Welcome to episode 132 of Cocktail Hour. I'm Andy.
And I'm Sherry. Is it only 132?
I believe so. I could have miscounted. You know how that works.
Hmm.
Who else is with us?
I'm Colette Moody.
Woohoo! And in the flesh, too, by the way. I'm loving this.
2 months in a row.
I know. It's awesome.
I feel like it's more than 2, but okay.
Is it 3?
I think so.
I think you're right. I think it's
so.
3. Yeah.
Okay.
It's old hat now.
Oh, goodness gracious. Right? Yay. What's everybody drinking?
Drinking some delicious water.
Uh-huh.
It's orange water, orange bubbly water.
Hydrating.
And my fancy 414
Very nice.
locally made glass.
But it's 404. I'd be a little more impressed.
Why? Oh.
What you drinking, Colette?
This is whiskey sour
Ooh, I love that glass.
in my voodoo stout glass.
Nobody does voodoo like you do. Okay, never mind.
Voodoo that you do so well.
That's right. And I'm having a disappointing vodka and lime seltzer. I should have put gin in here, but I don't know. I thought, well, let's try vodka for a change.
Why is it disappointing?
I think because I'm so used to the only time I almost always drink lime water now is with gin. So when I take that first sip, there's no gin. And it's like, it just kind of doesn't hit the taste buds right.
Yeah, I feel like vodka on its own as a spirit just does not have much going on unless it's a flavored vodka. When I get vodka, I usually buy citrus vodka. And that goes in almost every recipe that I use vodka for. But I would say I probably buy vodka the least of any of the major spirits. I can buy a bottle of vodka and it'll last me a year and a half.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I just don't use a lot of vodka.
Damn. Wow. And on that note, we are going to be talking about Val McDermid's first book in her series with, I forget what she calls it, the
Wire in the Blood?
The Wire in the Blood series on BBC, but it's the Mermaids singing?
Singing. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think it's the Tony Hill, Carol, what the hell's her last name? Carol Jordan series, I think. Anyway, but it is the Mermaids singing, and it is by Val McDermid. Sorry, Val, if you're listening, we're messing it up. But that's what we're talking about today. And I listened to the audiobook. I think you two did as well, right?
I did. I don't know that Sherry made it all the way through.
I did. I was really kind of put off by the narrator. I didn't like his intonations. I didn't care for the voice, his higher pitched voice. I just didn't. I'm sure that he does a fine job. He did a fine job reading it and acting it out. I just didn't care for the intonations that he used in many of the words. There was something about him the way that he read this that really rubbed me the wrong way. So I stopped listening and read part of it, but then I just ran out of time and I was like, okay, crap, I'm just going to have to go back to the audiobook. So I did finish it with the audiobook.
Well, so I don't know how spoilery we're going to get.
It's super old. I think we should spoil it.
Well, then let's talk about how old it is, because initially, right? So we get into the story. And I started jotting down all the things that made me feel like this was from 1,000 years ago, right? Because there is a point where we're talking about, I can't find a payphone. Data is being stored on 3.5-inch floppy disks.
Yeah.
They were talking about somebody took the cassette out of somebody's answering machine.
Right.
It was adorable. And things like, oh, well, you need expensive software and hardware to get screenshots from the computer. And I was like,
for video editing and all of that stuff.
What year did this come out, right? All right, so I went and I looked up the book, and it said the year that it gave was 2006. And I'm like,
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So it turns out that was the edition.
Okay.
2006 was the edition that came out, because it actually came out in 1995. But I listened to a lot of this. Like, this came out in 2000. Like, every time they would say something, I would be like, well, why didn't they just call on their cell phone, right? I don't understand. This came out in 2006, right? And so eventually I did a little bit more Nancy Drewing, and I was like, oh, the first edition came out in the 20th century. But still, I mean, the amount of homophobia and transphobia and sexism and just general misogyny and racism, particularly within the police department, I was like, shit, this came out in 95. This, it did not really put me in a good place.
We've come a long way. I had a really hard time with, you know, with the homophobia. Was just it pushed me a bit in ways that, I mean, you know, you expect stuff like that, especially when they're, you know, in the element that it's set. You know, you expect these cops to be assholes, and it is older, but it was just, you know, to publicly call. There was just so many derogatory terms for gay men that it made me, I'm not a prude or anything like that, you know, but it made me a bit uncomfortable. It made me a lot uncomfortable. And and then the trans stuff. I mean,
so I guess we should probably give a synopsis.
Yeah. You want me to? I can just read it.
Yeah.
Read it, girl. Read it.
All right, let me pull it up.
Read it like you mean it.
I'll do my best. I will do my best. This was the summer he discovered what he wanted at a gruesome museum of criminology far off the beaten track of more timid tourists. Visions of torture inspired his fantasies like a muse. It would prove so terrifying, or so terribly fulfilling. The bodies of 4 men had been discovered in the town of Bradfield. Enlisted to investigate is criminal psychologist Tony Hill. Even for a seasoned professional, the series of mutilation, sex murders is unlike anything he's encountered before. But profiling the psychopath is not beyond him. Hill's own past has made him the perfect man to comprehend the killer's motives. It also made him the perfect victim. A game has begun for the hunter and the hunted. But as Hill confronts his own hidden demons, he must also come face to face with an evil so profound he may not have the courage or the power to stop it. You don't even get anything about Carol in this at all, or anyone else. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
There were a lot of things I had a problem with this book.
Me too. And like part of it, you feel like you kind of need to brush off and say, well, it was the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. And I was surprised that this book multiple times made references to the Silence of the Lambs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because some of the things I felt were kind of derivative of the Silence of the Lambs. And some of the things that I didn't like about it are some of the things that I don't like about Silence of the Lambs. It bothers me when they make gay characters or trans characters these horrifically tortured, psychotic, evil people because they just can't cope with their sexuality or their gender identity. And I find that very frustrating. And if you look at movies and books in general where there is serial killer, you find sort of a disproportionate number of people are in the LGBTQ community. And that just it chaps me. Right?
How do you feel? How does knowing that Val McDermid is a lesbian affect how you feel about that?
Well, that's the thing, right? So I knew that ahead of time. In a way, I do feel like for a book that was written in the 90s, I feel like she was probably much more compassionate and understanding. You know, and I feel like the main characters were pretty sensitive around that, right? But that doesn't make up for the fact that the serial killer is this, you know, and so let's compare it now. I did not read the Silence of the Lambs book, right? But I watched the movie, and I thought the movie was phenomenal, and the killer was terrifying. I didn't feel like this killer was terrifying. This killer, whenever we cut to her, just made me mad. Right? So this is a book where we jump from various people's POV quite a bit, right? And periodically we go into the killer's POV, and you always know that it's the killer's POV because it starts off with file from floppy disk number blah 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 blah, and then it got to a point where as soon as it would start like that, I'd be like, oh shit.
I did the same thing.
Like I don't even, because the character just made me mad.
I don't know. I was where you weren't terrified by the character. I kind of was.
No,
just because of the here's the thing that really upset me. Here's what really
was it early on in the book?
Well, just throughout the book, the level of torture and violence, it was a lot for me. I mean, the graphic, gruesome way that he tore up their bodies, and when he killed that dog, it really upset me.
Yeah, so like that is when it started. Like, I wanted to get into the head of the serial killer. Or I at least wanted to be terrified of the serial killer. Like, keep the killer an enigma if you want. I mean, that's kind of what they did in Silence of the Lambs. You don't really get into the head as much as you see what's going on, and then you slowly start to learn who the killer is and what the killer is about. And then it's like,
we do that through Clarice and Lecter, right?
In this story, we're jumping back and forth like from the very get-go. And one of the first things that the killer does that we are part of is kill the neighbor's dog with the intent. I mean, he accidentally kills the dog.
Yeah, just meant to torture it.
Right, really wanted to torture the German Shepherd that lived next door. Yeah, and I was like, oh, I don't know how much further I'm going to make it if this is how this is going to be. So again, that didn't terrify me. That just made me want to kick the shit out of this person.
We should. The blurb really didn't give a good idea of what the story is actually about. So we should do that, right? So there's a serial killer who has been killing. So they don't even realize that it's a serial killer until at the fourth dead body. Then everybody finally is like, okay, yeah, this is a serial killer. He's taking out gay men who are not super out or anything like that. So it has to be somebody who's involved in the community in some way or has access to places where they would have met these guys, right? They assume, the detectives assume that this is another gay man or a man of some sort, because it would have to be, whoever it is has to be fairly strong to move these bodies around, because they're being killed in one location and dumped someplace else. So they get the police, they get a little task force together. They recruit the psychologist or psychiatrist, Tony Hill, to come in and do a profile. And this is still a fairly new-ish science, they keep saying. And Carol Jordan is put in charge of the detail, and she works directly with Tony Hill. Now, Tony has his own issues, and we get to know quite a bit about him. Well, as much as we get to know anything about anybody, really, we don't know very much about. We don't really get, I don't think, a lot of deep character development with anybody.
Agreed.
So you have Tony, who's got some sexual issues. He's impotent, and he is regularly called by a woman named Angelica, right? Was it Angelica? Yeah. Angelique, some Angelica.
Angelica.
And he feels really guilty about it. He feels dirty about it. But as things go on and she continues to call, they're able to eventually have successful phone sex. And he starts to think, well, maybe, maybe we should meet and see how things go. Because, he's feeling some progress. Meanwhile, you have Carol Jordan, who is essentially, she must be like one of the only women in the police department.
Right. And she is treated like utter crap because of it.
Yeah. She has a vagina, so she is incapable of serious police work or, being a leader.
Vagina hampers everything.
It does.
Really gets in the way.
It does. So Carol and Tony and this other small group of people, including one of the higher ups who's a decent guy. I can't remember his name. Brennan, I think.
Yeah,
Brandon. Yeah, he's a fairly decent guy. And then you have
Cross.
Then you have Cross, who is an ignorant fuckhead bastard. And you have, and so they call this publicly, this is the case of the queer killer, because, but inside the when the police are talking amongst themselves, they use all kinds of horrible things,
Yes.
But pirates, and I mean all of the horrible things, the slurs that we haven't heard from decent people in 20 years.
Yes.
Exactly. So that's where we're at. That's where the investigation comes from and all of this. So now it is trying to track the killer. Meanwhile, the killer is also tracking the progress in the media and wants to make sure that the killer is it turns out to be a transsexual, a transgender person. I don't know. And there were times when I was like, I wonder if this could be this person. And I wondered if it could be Angelica. And then I was like, oh, no, because they keep saying, well, you'd have to be really strong. And then they go into the whole, well, a trans, they call it, I don't think they called them transgender, did they? They were called transsexuals.
Transsexual.
Right? Yeah. So the trans person, would be going against their nature to be violent. A woman only wants to be loving and giving and wants to get all of their satisfaction from pleasing her man or whatever. There's no way that a transgender woman would be a killer. It was just kind of ridiculous. And honestly, where you felt like Val McDermid did some kindness there, it was still, the whole thing just kind of made me unhappy and made it difficult for me to really enjoy the book. Between the raging homophobia and the over-the-top torture, I had a really hard time liking the book.
The only thing that got me through the torture was the fact that I was listening to the audiobook, and I don't remember the name of the octogenarian thespian who was doing the audiobook, but I looked him up. He's unfortunately no longer with us, but he was no spring chick, and his enunciation was remarkable. So you have that, and you mix that with all the super graphic torture that happens, and sometimes it just made me titter like a little schoolgirl. It was like as his rectum ripped and it drove in. It was like this.
Let me see. I've got it still here on.
Oh, you're looking him up?
Yeah, it should say.
I mean, and he did a fine job with all the accents and stuff.
No, he did.
This person's from Yorkshire, and he was able to do a Yorkshire accent. And I mean, he did all that stuff well.
Graham Roberts.
Graham Roberts.
Graham Roberts.
Right. So the ripping rectums. It was weird and kind of funny, and it was kind of the only thing that got me through the really graphic aspects of it. But again, there were really no points where I was like afraid, because I
wasn't afraid. It just really kind of creeped me out.
Because
he kept going and he kept getting, or she, and I really feel like, and that was another thing is that. And they mentioned at the end, they mentioned that it wasn't. They didn't think that Angelica was a true trans woman, because what they really thought was that he was a gay man who could not deal with the fact of being that he was a gay man, and instead decided the only way that it would be logical for him or possible for him to have the feelings for the men that he did was if he was really a woman trapped in a man's body. And that made me feel kind of gross too. The whole thing made me feel gross.
Yeah, I concur.
But I liked the mystery was pretty good. I mean, but the things that bothered me so much that it made it difficult to enjoy the mystery unfolding, and being able to, how they were identifying red herrings and stuff like that. I think it was really well done. The mystery aspects and stuff. It just was so hard for me to get past the other things that if those things weren't there, I would have probably really, really enjoyed this book.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, because I felt that the psychological, the profiling aspects were well researched and were interesting. Mm-hmm. It's entirely possible that if we had picked this series up in a different book, that wasn't all about this trans killer, who we're not going to call her a trans person because we think she's a gay man, and we're torturing dogs, and I don't know. Yeah, it really did kind of get to the point where every time a section would start from the killer's POV, I was like, oh, just shut up. Like, I don't care about anything that you have to contribute.
I have read one. I did read her newer book called Out of Bounds. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
So not part of this series.
No, no. It's I think I've read so many mystery books that are part of a series. I think it's the Karen Puri series, but I definitely recommend it.
So it's a different series.
It is. It's a different, yeah. Okay. And I do want to read this. I do want to read the next book in this series, because I think I did like Carol and Tony. And
but didn't you feel like I don't know, their relationship seemed a little, I don't know, didn't that seem a little forced?
Yeah, and I hope that they don't actually end up together. I've never seen the show. I don't know anything else about the series, but they don't seem well suited. They seem really well suited to be friends. I think that they
are well suited to be friends. I've actually watched the entire series.
Oh,
and they do well together as friends.
Is there a romantic element to, at least to the TV show?
It's been a while since I've seen the whole thing. I don't believe there is.
Okay,
I would be down for that then, because I like them together. I think they worked really well together. They obviously had, and that was like the shining aspect of for Carol, is he treated her with respect, and he thought, he made sure that he expressed to her that he was impressed with the psychological profiling aspects that she was coming up with. And I liked that. I had that was great. And he wasn't, even though he was doing something sexually that he was uncomfortable with, I never felt bad toward him for it,
Nope.
So Andy, I think you liked it more than we probably did.
My first awareness of this show, of the book, was through the television show, and there were some moments in the show because they started it with this book.
Oh,
and yeah, so there were some torture scenes that were relived through not animatronics, but like the torture chair, right, with the cone, and it was like a computer graphics that recreated what had happened based on the wounds, and you just like when you watch it, but they don't actually show you anything super gory, which is good. They do show the cigarette burns all over the chest, which was a little horrible, but that's about the extent of any of the injuries that you see in this show. The actors that they picked were really, really well done. The gentleman that plays Tony Hill is Robeson Green, which I think he's fairly prolific actor in Britain. You see him in a lot of different things, but I'd never seen the woman that played Carol Jordan, Hermione
Norris.
I hadn't seen her before in anything, but she did really, really well with this character. And they have really great friendship chemistry, and that's what actually kept me watching the show.
So I know it's at some point in this show, my second or third wife, Simone Labib, is in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was like the only reason that I would be interested in before reading this and watching it. But so what does she play? Do you know?
I don't remember.
Is she gorgeous? Is she gorgeous in it?
How could she not be?
Yeah, that was a stupid question. So Andy, keep talking about what you thought.
Oh, I'm so able to suspend disbelief. I thought about when I'm listening to this book, knowing that it was written in the 90s. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right. There's no sensitivity training. Yeah, that sounds about right. God damn it. Yeah, well, we come a little farther, along, but I think it was probably a very fair representation of what it was like in 1994, 95, and especially in that environment. And I hate to say that, but, cops, at least back then, weren't known for their sensitivity.
They're not known for it now.
Yeah, but so it
just
had to have been much worse. Yeah.
Our local PD is fabulous, just so you all know.
Are you trying to prevent them from busting down your door?
Before this is over.
I give regularly. But yeah, so I mean, I knew what to expect because I had seen the show, right? There was more detail in the book than they could obviously put in the show. So it didn't smack me full on like it did you two. Although I was really annoyed with the serial killer dictating in the files. It kind of took me out of that suspenseful moment into, fuck. Then it felt like somebody was reading the file. And it always took me out of the moment, And that really did bother me. I'm sure there was a better way to do it, but
I feel like when it is a story about a serial killer or a psychopath of some sort, I find it more interesting if we slowly get glimpses into what that person is like, as opposed to having that person get entire sections of narrative from their POV. And making them, a character early on that you get to know.
Well, she was a character early on, but we didn't know it. But you still weren't getting any real background or understanding of this character. Okay, so since it's an old book, we're going to tell you what it is. Tony was getting these phone calls.
I think that already happened.
Right.
I think Sherry already.
Yeah, I already spilled those beans.
Yeah.
Angelica is actually the serial killer. So at the end, toward the end of the book, Angelica nabs Tony, and she takes Tony to the, I'm going to call it the torture dungeon. That's not what it is. Well, it is, but you know what I mean. It's the torture dungeon.
Took him to the barn.
The barn, man, go to the barn. Anyway, so, ooh, the UPS guy's here. I think my stuff is delivered. Yeah, man, there it comes.
Is it your special chair with the cone in it?
No. That's my new leather products. No, just kidding.
The Judas chair?
The Judas chair. So at the end, fortunately, Tony is saved, not before having to endure some things, which if you want to read the book, you can read the book.
Well, and I do want to bring up a question about that later, but go on.
Okay. So in the book, Tony winds up killing Angelica. In the TV series, Angelica gets captured and goes to prison, and Tony visits her in prison.
Oh,
so that was kind of interesting. That was a complete surprise to me that they varied that much from the book. I assume that at some point they intended to revisit that character somewhere down the line.
See, I think that's a good. I think that's
that idea.
A good deviation from the plot of the novel, because personally, I found. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about my question about this scene, right? So the serial killer has captured Tony Hill. She has him shackled in her sex dungeon. He has decided that he is going to psychologically try and appeal to her to free him in the hopes that he is not going to die a horrific, horrible death like these other people. And so he basically gets her to agree to give him head. Okay,
but there's other stuff that goes on before that. He just didn't go, you know what, since you got me here.
Right. Okay. But I mean, so he's handcuffed in front of him, and he decides, like, this is his plan, that while her mouth is around him,
right,
he is gonna crack her on the top of the head.
I wondered the same thing. I'm like, wait,
what?
He's lucky she didn't do an Elena Bobbitt. Seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I just did not feel like that was a scene that was written by a person who had a penis.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Not one with any nerve endings.
I had a real issue with that particular. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I just don't think.
But they did talk about he was going to make a full recovery. So apparently he did sustain some damn injury.
Yeah. And I mean, it's that is made clear at the time too.
Yeah.
That yeah. So that and see, I even wrote down here in my notes, donkey punch strategy?
Donkey punch.
No.
No. Oh my God, you are awesome. Can I just say that?
I was impressed by how well he emotionally played her, though. It really did a great job, I thought, with, you're the only person who I've been able to have any sort of intimacy with, and she wants somebody to freaking love her. That's all she wants.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the character is written from like a semi-sympathetic perspective, but then she tortured and killed a dog. So at that point,
you can't get past that.
I can't. And that was pretty much one of the first times that we meet the character. Yeah. So at that point, I was done with her, and I just really wasn't going to get past that.
Yeah.
Damn, man.
But yeah, I did enjoy some of the stuff from the 90s. So there is a journalist who
I forgot about her.
She's clearly evil. as many members of the media are often depicted, right? And so she basically is just banging people on the police department to get information. And I thought
that's not true. That's not true.
That's exactly true.
No, she just had that one boyfriend. Did she sleep with more than just Kevin?
Well, that we saw, we don't know. But I mean,
I think you're.
No. She made it pretty clear that she didn't have any feelings for him, and that she was going to have to end the relationship, and that the relationship was purely whatever information she could get from him. I mean,
but that doesn't mean that she's a serial screwer for information on the police force. It could be, but I think that's more your assumption than. I'm not trying to defend her. I'm just saying she may not be that big of a whore. Okay, just a little whore, not necessarily.
She's
so
kind of a big whore
in the show.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And actually, Kevin, I don't remember in the book or not, but Kevin gets called out. He winds up being found out by Carol Jordan.
That didn't happen. I don't think that didn't happen in the book.
It happened
because I kept waiting for it to
for
happen.
him to get his right. Because I mean, so he's married, but he's sleeping with this journalist.
Was he?
Yes, he's married, and he's sleeping with this journalist and she is basically sleeping with him purely to get information.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
She's a little whore.
But I did enjoy like the standard descriptions of her going to a computer, typing in a search, and then sitting back and lighting a cigarette while she waits for the results. And I was like, oh my God, I could almost hear the dial-up modem.
And she kind of got hers in the end too, because when everything happened, she's out walking in the woods and there are no cell phones, so you know.
Didn't her car break down? It wasn't that she was just walking in the woods. Her car broke down.
She ended up out all night. Yeah, that was great.
That was good.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, so some of the things that I jotted down: open sexism, homophobia, racism, open contempt for sex workers and the public in general.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It was all in there.
I mean, there was lots of calling people whores and treating people who they thought were whores like utter shit. And just talking about the police in particular, talking about the public like they were just pieces of shit. You know, and that's probably completely accurate. I don't want to say that isn't accurate, certainly of the mid 90s, but
not
it's
my
awful. It's right. Everywhere except where Andy lives, of course.
They're awesome here. Just saying.
I feel so good that I'm going to come and visit you in a few months. And that I will be protected by the greatest police force.
They are awesome. Yes.
You got some tickets you're trying to get out of? I don't know what's going on.
Oh, no. They're just awesome.
All right.
Oh, and I also jotted down the use of the term predatory homosexuals, because that completely pissed me off.
Well, there's a lot of predatory heterosexuals.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure apparently a lot of them are on the police force where most of these characters work.
Don't stroke out, Colleen. Don't stroke out.
No, I'm not stroking out. I'm just saying. I didn't really appreciate that. And but again, I did laugh when they were talking about a scanner. How would you scan something into a computer? And the guy is like, well, that is a sophisticated piece of hardware that only, say, 15% of the population would even have. I'm like, a scanner? Okay.
That's awesome, though. Yeah, but think about how far we've come in technology, right?
Yeah, nobody has scanners anymore. It's like scanner. That's like having a fax.
I have a scanner. The hell?
I have a scanner too. It's in my all-in-one printer.
Oh God.
Fine.
Well, clearly I enjoyed this more than you guys did, but I also like the series a lot.
I think that might have had something to do with it too.
I'm sure
that you kind of knew what was coming.
They did.
Were they just as homophobic in the series for this episode?
Yeah, okay. Some were. As a matter of fact, the guy, is it Don Merrick that did the undercover work at the gay bar?
Yeah.
He was a tough nut to crack, but by the end, he had, I think, a little bit more compassion. So it was kind of an interesting transformation for him. But yeah, he was definitely a homophobe. Yeah.
So it looks like the BBC series came out in 2002.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So that would. Hello, we're on the move.
Andy's moving around.
I'm moving around, man.
So even just in the 6 or 7 years between those, it seems like there was probably some progress made, and I would wager that the series itself is probably a little less in your face and homophobic. But maybe I'm wrong. I've not seen it.
I would suggest that you see it and make the comparison and see what you think. There are definite homophobes in the show. They don't. To me, I don't think they dwelled on the fact that this person was anything other than aberrant because of their behavior, not because of their sexual confusion, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it may be that we've come a long way since '95, so it's presented a little differently in the series, but not enough where it's a completely different story. So I would highly, highly recommend making the comparison by watching the first episode of Wire in the Blood, because that is the mermaid singing.
Why was it called the mermaid singing?
I never figured it out.
Well, that's taken from a T.S. Eliot poem, I think.
Maybe it went over my head. I don't know.
Because didn't every chapter start with some kind of literary quote?
Yeah.
All right, I'm looking. I'm on Netflix, and it doesn't look like they have it.
I think it's on. I think you can get it on maybe Hulu. I think possibly.
Or you could do what I did and bought the DVD complete series.
I wouldn't want to do that because when I can get it on something I already paid for.
Okay.
I really, at some point, and it's been a while since I've watched the older, because I forget how many seasons there are, 5, 6, but they're only like 3 episodes a season. It's ridiculous.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's how BBC does stuff like that. I don't know.
They do very short series.
Yeah,
and
like 6 episodes or something.
But it's somewhere in here, season 4, season 5, Carol Jordan leaves, and they don't really explain it. She goes to Ottawa or so. She goes to Canada. I don't know what the hell for. And then they bring in another person for Tony to work with.
That must be Simone.
They're more, I don't know, they're more like this, headbutting than they are working cooperatively together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it has its own dynamic.
Another woman?
Yeah.
I think that must be Simone.
It's not a bad dynamic, but I really liked Tony and Carol working together. That was just more enjoyable.
Okay.
All right then.
But I would really, can't tell you guys enough, if you can find it and it's affordable, watch.
I know it's available. It's either on.
I think the whole first series is on Amazon streaming for like $3.99.
Hold on, I think
for real, $3.99.
Have you watched The Fall?
I have. I love it.
That shit was awesome.
Yeah, I tell you what.
Which one is that? I think
it's the one with Gillian Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
She kicked ass, man, with her blonde hair. I was like, what? And then when she kissed Husiku in the bar, I went, what?
Yeah, I think I posted a video clip of that on Facebook because I was like, yo, y'all
awesome.
need to check this shit out.
And I love right after that, the guy's still staying there. She's like, "You're still here?" She takes a drink. "You're still here?" It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't find it right now. What
was that actress's name? Archie.
I don't remember, but yes, I know who you're talking about.
Here, and her name is. God damn it!
That's not her name.
It's not.
Because that would be bad.
Right now, I'm pulling it up, y'all.
Archie Punjabi.
Oh, I love her.
She's awesome.
She is awesome. Yes.
Okay, super duper yummy.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we've got
Jillian now. Any day. Jillian, are you listening? I named my truck after you.
Oh, is that who you named your truck after?
I did. My truck's name is Anderson, yes. Because I couldn't name my truck Jillian because 3 SUVs back's name was Jillian. So I can't wait with Anderson.
So we've got about 12 minutes left.
Yep.
We do know what book we're reading next.
We do. Can y'all believe it?
And I've already read it. I found it very interesting. We've been talking about doing a nonfiction book. This is very timely also. So we're going to be reading I'll Be Gone in the Dark. I think that's what it's called, by Michelle McNamara.
Yeah.
And it is about her researching, looking for the Golden State Killer. And apparently I didn't know this before reading the book, but she actually coined that term.
Oh, did she? Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Now, Michelle, she passed away
she did.
like 2 years ago, I think. A couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't get to see the individual get
the fruits of her labors. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
and I mean, she didn't even completely finish the book, right? Didn't her husband finish it for her?
No, what he did is he got 2 other people who I believe worked with her and were very familiar with her notes and stuff. And this is all talked about in the book too, to finish the parts that she didn't. And while you're reading, there will be a chapter and it'll start with the following chapter this section is compiled from notes that Michelle took. So you know what she wrote and had completed and what parts she didn't.
Oh, wow.
And it's a really good book. You know, it's written, you feel like it's a novel. And one of the things that I really appreciated, again, I'm not necessarily squeamish. I read loads and loads of torture, murdery, thrillery goodness, but there's no graphic violence in this. So that's not something that if you don't like that kind of thing, you don't have to worry about that with this.
Oh, that's good.
She says these people were murdered in this way, but there's no graphic descriptions of what the people went through or anything like that. It's a lot of tracking down leads and just the tenacity of this woman.
Wow.
And spending years and years and years of her life. It was an obsession.
Wow.
I really enjoyed it. It did become a bit difficult at times because there's so many different cases and a lot of names. But it was still manageable. So I hope you guys like it as much as I did. I think
I'm really looking forward to it. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think
cool.
It'll be a good one. It'll be a good one.
All right. Awesome. So when shall we have the next show? The 9th of June?
Let me look on my old lady paper calendar.
That's awesome.
Your old lady paper calendar.
I got an old lady paper calendar right here.
I tell you what, that's one of the things about our digital age that I really appreciate. Electronic calendars, being able to drive my truck and say, text so-and-so, and what do you want to say? And I just start spouting off and using punctuation, which is very exciting. and sending it out without having to type it. It's fast. I like it.
All right then.
Yeah, man. What's your old lady calendar say, Colette?
Says the 9th is fine.
All right, yay.
Mine also says the 9th is fine. Okay,
awesome.
So we still have a couple bucks. We can give away a copy of the ebook.
This feels a little too easy. Something feels wrong.
It is a little easy. That's true.
Yeah.
Let me write this down. Okay, so if anybody is interested in getting an ebook copy, and the ebook has the audiobook will come with a PDF that will show some maps and some different images and things like that. That will be included in the ebook. So
which book are you talking about? The one we're going to read?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so June 9th.
Right.
I'll be gone in the dark. So if you are interested in getting an ebook copy, leave a comment on our YouTube page or on our website, cocktailhour.us. No later than June 8th, and we'll pick a winner. Oh, no, we want to do it before that, right?
Right. So what about May 31st, the end of the month?
All right, we'll do it by May 31st.
Yeah, so
that way you can read along and chat with us.
Awesome.
All right. So, yeah. All right then.
Good. Well, thank everybody for coming out and visiting, or listening and or watching later. But we really appreciate your support. Thank you very much for tuning in. Tell your friends, and have a great rest of the month.
Yay! All right then. Bye.
Bye.